Good morning. We are going to discuss the Halacha brought in the Rambam on many occasions, but this one is in Hilchas Issurei Biah, Perokim Aleph, Halacha Tazayin. Okay, so the Rambam writes, Ein ha'isha eilam b'tumasa. We know that there is a tumah of niddah, and specifically that's what he's referring to here. And so a woman does not got out of her tumah, the yetzimi de erva, and therefore, and also not lose her status as right now an erva, which is usher to her husband or to anybody else. Until she goes into a kosher mikveh. And then he adds, and as an afterthought, the Hilchas Mikvahs is mikvah kosher, what's called to make a kosher, apostle, the derech hatfila, mishbetei chatzitza, all the dinner chatzitza. Okay. Then he adds another line. Aval im rachza b'merchatz. If she went into a bathhouse, and I feel enough for like kol meimish b'elam, which is a very interesting expression. It's just an exaggerated expression of all the waters of the world fell upon her. Harehi achar rechitza k'may shahoysa koydem rechitza bikares. Not to talk about. She's the same before or after rechitza. And then he adds, she'ein lach dava shamayla mituma l'tayra. Nothing goes from tuma to tayra elatvila. In the mikra, a b'mayan, a b'yamim, she'ein k'mayan, either in a mikra, well water, or an ocean, which is like a well. As it explained the mikvahs. We're going to go through the details, the problems of this halacha, which I think are quite obvious, but we'll see soon more. Then it comes to halacha yitches. These 7 days when they're counting down to be able to go to the mikvah. It does all the dinim halachakas and ends again. The times of counting, the days of counting before she goes to the mikvah, the same as when she was an actual niddah, when blood was flowing. She's still in chorus. Now, the Rambam here seems superfluous, totally out of place, and yet, why does he do it? First, why the stress? Why are we talking about tumah here? We're talking about erva. Hilchas Issurei Biah. That should be the focus. And we've already talked about the fact, the beginning of Hilchas niddah. A couple of Perokim ago, he mentioned the fact that niddah is an erva like any other, like any other erva. He should have said it. An Isha doesn't go out of being a niddah. That's what it is. Okay. From the bigger, from the others and the smaller ones. In Perek Daled, he spoke about Tumas Niddah, Zova, Yeledes. And then in Halacha Gimel, he wrote that Mamed Varim Amurim, that there is such a thing as days and countings. And she's not going to become Tameh. Then he says, when is it that the Tumah has anything to do with days? Is when she goes to the mikveh after the day she counts. But if they don't go to the mikveh, after many years, chayiv kars. And then he ends up should be yomim u'tvila tola hakos. Okay, you could touch yom u'tvila means that if you have the days, then there'll be tvila. Okay, we'll talk about it. So he already told us clear. No, go to the mikveh. What comes Perik Yudalev, and he goes back, repeats it. Why does he do that? Next, Hilchas Mikvahs that we got references in our halacha. He goes clearly, Kolat Meim, Bein Adam and Kalim, Bein Shnit Mitum Chamura, Shaltair, Bein Shnit Mitum Shaltair, Ein Lahem, Tara, Ella, Betvil, B'Mayim. So why does he have to write it here? That's what the is about. How do you get Torah? Now, okay, so you'll tell me you wanted a reference, but first of all, he did that already. So either you want to tell me because he want that the voice is later, he already did it before. Elamai wants to be more detailed. He's detailed in Hilchos Mikvahs. And not only that, but here itself he tells you that he's detailed in Hilchos Mikvahs. He tells you first about Mikvahs, then he says, no, but I explained it in Hilchos Mikvahs. And then if you wanted to say, he should have said like this. If you wanted to be, all he should have said is Hilchos Mikvahs. If he wanted to say, you want to know the halachas of getting tar, Hilchos Mikvahs explain the halacha of what's considered a mikveh and that's all. And at most, he wanted to add. Then he goes about the idea of if she went to Americans, you could add that too. It's also an Hilchos Mikvahs. And then again, Ein Lok Dover Shemayla Mitum Latara. Here he's talking about Arab, not Tumatara. And then again, at the end of the halachas, he repeats again. Shadayini B'Korah such a thing. Why the stress on the chorus? And Machlal, why does he have to repeat it again? He keeps repeating this. I want to suggest something that I don't believe is the pshat, but I might have an influence on the pshat. And that is that the reason the Rambam is so medagdic and repeats this idea is if you read the Chuvas of the Rambam, the Simulation and Bays, Chuvas of Rambam, it seems that this was a major issue that took place in Egypt. He writes, and it's Rashlu B'Dvar Tvilas Niddah B'Mei Mikvah U'B'Sfira Shirei Me'akim. And he writes there, Nohagu Minig Minus, and they accepted a non-Jewish belief, a non-Torah belief, to rely on washing yourself in Mayim She'uvim. Not only that they even allow that a woman that's not a niddah should sprinkle water on her. I mean, it seems to have really gotten out of hand. And the Rambam writes a long tshuva and about how it's not appropriate. There's just one line in that tshuva that struck me very interesting. And he writes, "V'chein v'lachein is harnu mebate knesiyas lebate midrashes v'heirinu kol eila honyanim." And that is, "Chianida dinam echad koidim shetikonis lamerchatz v'achas shetikonis lamerchatz." A niddah has the same thing before going into a bathhouse and afterwards. And then he uses the lashon of afila rochtzak b'chol meimish b'olam harehi b'nidosa achatave b'mayim b'meimik b'daf. Now, there's a very strong similarity between those words and what he writes in the Rambam. that phrase struck me. And we explained to him, he writes the chiyuv of the what you have to do, the great sins, and he really goes, and then he goes on to the importance of it, and he signs, it's a bezin that signed it, and it was really, really strong. Okay, now this lashon is similar to Avim Rachz of Mikav Nafla Koy Meimish Beilam, which is very similar lashon. Harei Yachar Chitzik Mashayz Gaid Mechitzik. Very, the lashon is what hit me that he fell back on that lashon. So you could say that the reason that Rambam repeats it and is so adamant about it is because that was a very weak thing that went on at the time. Just hard to believe that would be the reason that Rambam would write it, and that he would write it like that. First of all, it was a time-sensitive issue. So why would he write that in the Sefer that's supposed to be the replacement of Issurei Biah in some sense? Now, again, as a side point, we know that the Rambam Shita is that's the way the Torah is written, at least to some degree. Probably deeper reasons for the Torah, but at the simplest level, the Torah, the Rambam explains why Kabbanis, why the Eibishter gave the mitzvah to Kabbanis. Because at that time, Kabbanis was a very common thing, and people were using it to the wrong place. And that's why the Eibishter said, you got to bring it here. I want Kabbanis this way. So it's not ungefragt in the Rambam's philosophy that he should write, that Torah should be addressing a current event. However, it's unlikely, even in the Rambam's philosophy, to believe that was the only reason. That's just the most base, elementary reason that he gives in explaining in Mar Nevuchim what it's about. Also, he doesn't have to repeat. I mean, every time he mentions it. And third, we don't find people in the Mefarshim of the Rambam historically, or at least the ones that I look at, and that most people are more common with, use this as an explanation, such kind of an explanation in the Rambam. However, I don't want to give up on it totally for a different reason, and I'll explain soon. I want to focus on the Rambam's verbiage in Perek Dalet that we mentioned. He brings the halacha that zmane tuma, niddah, zava, yeledes, how long they have to wait and they have to count. And then, as we mentioned, halacha gimel. Bamed varem amurim. Now, listen to these words. Shat tuma tluya b'yamin. That the tuma goes according to the days. Bishetovla b'mei mikvah acha hayam asra. When she went to the mikvah. Now, that phrase is so totally out of reality. L'chayra. He doesn't say it. First of all, why is it Bamed Vamurim? It's not true. Tumah is not totally Yomim. Tefillah is totally Yomim. The setup seems to be there is such a thing as Yomim for Tumah, and then there's Tefillah. Not only that, when is Tumah Tluya B'Yomim? When she's table. What's going on? Is that when is Tefillah good after Yom? That's what should be. Okay, but he says later, Shai Yom and Tefillah Talak Kosev, you can get by. But you need this and then that. But here it seems to me that the Yom is what's retired. Only when will the Yom be retired? When there's Tefillah afterwards. And the Ahmed Var Amurim is that true? There's no Amurim. Nothing was said. It's only totally Tefillah. I mean, the phraseology here is really, really difficult to grasp. But so I again, it's not relevant halachically. It's relevant only understanding the concept. It seems to be, yes, Yomim is mitaher. It's not a means to get to Tefillah. Tefillah is what solidifies Yomim. The Yomim is mitaher with a condition. If you go to the mikveh, the chalais of the taras hayomim is when you type. I wanted to say that gives room to the mistake that he mentions in the tshuva, that people dealt with the tefillah in a lighter fashion. Since it's the yomim that's mitzaher with a chalais after tefillah. I just want to give an understanding of this. The chinuch Mitzukuf Samachvav regarding niddah writes that many things in the writes We go through that explanation. The days is what it's about. The separation, the days. Perhaps you can even say that tefillah has more to do with the tumah, the yamim have more to do with the erva. Doesn't matter. You need both. And that's why he stresses that everything needs tefillah. You would think erva, yeah, erva. What does tefillah do with erva? Tefillah does do with tumah. Okay, we once spoke about it, how the erva comes from the tumah. Okay, but that's all the understanding. But the bottom line is, Yomim would take her out of being an erva, except that is a tonight. You won't get out of it until it's the table. But it's the Yomim that counts. And perhaps that's why he stresses, I feel enough for like kol name is shalem. That was no change. Even though there is a process already, didn't affect you. And we explained somewhere else that the din of the erva comes from tumah as opposed to other ervas. That's why there's differences. And that's why he stresses shein l'davar shamayla mituma l'tara, because erva's niddah is tluy in tumah. You got to get out of the tumah to lose the erva then. Perhaps that can make sound the erva itself it would have been up, but since it's totally in tumah, it doesn't go. And that's just a possibility. You don't need it, but it helps. So that's why he stresses the Dinei Tefillah, even though he writes it in Hilchos Mikvahs, to bring out the concept of the Tumas Niddah. Even though it's Tluya B'Yamim Tefillah, he has to stress that no, Tumah and Erva are constant and they don't go away. So now, when he comes to Hilchos Archok Niddah, he stresses that Adani Makor is such a tit. Even though we're talking about Chok, not Issa Erva. So you'd say, the process began already. But no, she's still in chorus. And therefore, nothing has changed. And that's why he ends up again, Kloli Shadava Yinig Ima, don't make a difference. So, even though the answer is not what that he's just responding to the current event, but the current event is a result of the true understanding of how Taras niddah and what niddah is all about. And since that's the case, so there is a connection. And as we said, that even though it's the external connection, there's a pneumistic connection too in the lomdas of what Tuma and niddah and erva are all about of Tumas Niddah, and therefore it would be very, very good to understand that this is the case over here. Thank you very much. Slocha Rabba, like gesund stark.